My name is Shelby, and what I'm about to tell you is the one memory I've spent 8 years trying to bury. I'm not sharing it for attention. I'm sharing it because I still don't sleep through the night, and maybe saying it out loud will make it feel less real. 8 years ago, I lost my husband, Thomas, in a motorcycle accident. He was everything to me, steady, kind, someone who made the ordinary feel meaningful. Before he died, we used to sit up late flipping through cruise brochures. We promised that on our 10th anniversary, we'd finally take a transatlantic cruise together, dress up for the captain's dinner, take cheesy sunset photos, complain about the drink prices, all of it. He didn't live long enough to make it to that anniversary, but the date still came. And instead of staying home staring at old pictures, I booked the cruise anyway, some attempt at honoring a future we never got. The ship was enormous, a floating city packed with thousands of people, families, honeymooners, retirees. I thought the crowd would drown out the loneliness. Instead, it amplified it. Everywhere I looked were couples holding hands, kids laughing, women asking their husbands which restaurant they wanted for dinner. I felt like I was moving through a place I once belonged, but no longer had a right to be in. My balcony cabin was on Deck 8, room 8204, way down a long, quiet hallway removed from the elevators and noise. It was peaceful, or so I thought. The first couple of days were harmless. I spent most of my time reading on the upper deck, nursing cheap white wine, watching the endless blue horizon blur into the sky. I felt like I was floating in a bubble, the kind where you can see the world but not touch it. On the third night, everything changed, starting with the captain's cocktail hour. I met a couple named Layla and Mike. They were from Ohio, in their late 40s, and the kind of people who adopt strays like me. Layla was emotional and loud, and always worrying about something. Mike was calm, logical, quiet. They saw me sitting alone, and slid into my evening like I'd been part of theirs forever. "You can't sit here looking like a sad movie character," Layla told me, forcing a glass into my hand. "Come laugh with us." I watched it. I ended up having dinner with them, telling them about Thomas, the accident, and why I was on the cruise alone. Layla cried openly. Mike bought another round. For the first time since the trip started, I felt something close to normal, but that feeling died when I opened the door to my cabin that night. The moment I stepped inside, I felt it. That heavy sense that the room wasn't empty. It didn't smell like the usual disinfectant. It smelled warm and stale, like sweat and old smoke. But everything looked the same, nothing out of place. Except for one thing. Before dinner, I'd left a framed photo of Thomas angled on the nightstand, so that when I lay down, he'd be facing me. Now, that frame was lying face down. The seas were calm. Nothing had rocked enough to knock it over. Still, I tried to convince myself I was being dramatic. Grief does strange things to your perception. That night, I slept with the bathroom light on and the door cracked. Every creak of the ship sounded like footsteps. Every gust of air felt like breath on the back of my neck. The next morning, I didn't tell Layla and Mike about the photo. I didn't want to be the tragic widow ruining their vacation. We spent the day by the pool, listening to a steel drum band and pretending we weren't all floating miles from shore. The sun actually helped a bit. I almost let myself believe the photo thing had been nothing. But later that afternoon, when I walked down that long hallway back to my cabin, the unease returned. A crew member stepped out of a room 3 doors down from mine. At least, I assumed he was a crew member. Beige uniform. No cart. No towels. Nothing in his hands. He didn't smile, didn't greet me like every other employee on board had. He just stared. Sunken eyes, tracking me the whole way down the hall. By the time I reached my door, my hands were shaking. I fumbled with the key card, slipped inside, then threw the deadbolt. When I turned around, my heart dropped. My suitcase, zipped shut when I left, was wide open. Clothes removed. Not tossed, not rifled through. Arranged. My underwear was spread across the bed in a perfect circle, and in the middle of that circle, Thomas's picture frame, face down. I grabbed the phone to call security. No dial tone. Dead. That's when I heard the sound. A wet gurgling from the bathroom like a drain clearing after someone shut off the shower. But I hadn't used the shower. The bathroom door was cracked open. Steam drifted out in a slow, ghostly ribbon. My pulse hammered in my ears. Then the door creaked. Just an inch. A hand wrapped around the edge of it, pale, gripping hard enough for the knuckles to go white. And then a voice came out of the steam. Shelby. It was rough, low, mocking. A stranger's voice pretending familiarity. I'm glad you're home. I didn't turn around. I didn't want to see his face. My body moved faster than my mind, pure terror taking control. I clawed at the deadbolt with sweaty fingers as wet footsteps slapped onto the carpet behind me. Don't go, Shelby. The lock finally gave. I yanked the door open and ran. I don't remember the hallway clearly, just door numbers blurring past as I screamed and pounded on them. No one opened. They were all at dinner. I dove into an elevator with a couple, sobbing and shaking. They stared like I was insane, but at that point I didn't care. Security came quickly, 2 officers and a supervisor named Henderson. I told them everything. The underwear, the photo, the voice in the bathroom. They exchanged glances. They checked the room. 10 agonizing minutes passed before Henderson returned. Ma'am, there's no one in your cabin, I insisted. They were wrong. He showed me the electronic lock log. Only my keycard had accessed the room in 6 hours. No master key, no staff key. Layla defended me, outraged. Mike tried to calm the situation gently, but I could see he was doubting. Maybe not what happened, but my interpretation of it. I refused to sleep in that room. After enough arguing, the cruise line set up a cot for me in a locked conference room on the crew deck. I stayed there the rest of the trip. Didn't sleep, didn't shower, didn't go anywhere alone. I just waited for it to end. When the ship docked, I practically ran off. I didn't say goodbye to Layla or Mike. I didn't look back at the ship. I drove straight home, locked every door, turned on every light, and told myself I had escaped something I didn't understand. A week later, when I finally worked up the nerve to unpack, I found my digital camera at the bottom of the suitcase. I turned it on, planning to just delete everything. The first few pictures were normal sunsets, the atrium, a balcony selfie. Then the next photo appeared. It was my cabin, room 8204, taken in the dark, lit only by the TV's standby light. And in the picture, I was sleeping. The angle was from above me, as if someone were standing on the bed, standing over me. I clicked again. Another shot. Closer, my mouth slightly open. A strand of hair across my face, and a hand dirty, calloused, hovering inches from my cheek. Next photo. This time, the shot was taken from inside the closet, through the slats. I was sitting at the vanity, brushing my hair. Completely unaware, the timestamp showed it was the second morning of the cruise, meaning he hadn't broken in that night. He hadn't used a key. He had been inside the room already, hiding before I even arrived. When I ran screaming into the hallway and security searched the cabin, he hadn't left. He had just returned to whatever hiding space he used. I felt sick. The last photo nearly stopped my heart. It was taken inside my house. My open suitcase, and a hand, his hand placing the camera inside. He had followed me off the ship. He had been in my home. I moved out the next morning, left the majority of my belongings behind, and never went back alone. People always ask why I check behind shower curtains, under beds, inside closets every single night. Why I sleep with hall lights on. Why I don't travel anymore. It's because the scariest part of what happened wasn't that he was in my cabin. It's that he wanted me to know he could get into my life, my home, my room. And the worst part? The camera only showed the times he wanted me to know about. I don't let myself think about the ones he didn't photograph. I've been a maritime officer for 20 years. I've worked on cargo ships, tankers, and for the last decade, luxury cruise liners. You see a lot of things on the open ocean. You see storms that look like the wrath of God. You see bioluminescence that makes the water look like a galaxy. But you also see the darkness. People think cruise ships are safe bubbles. They aren't. They are small towns floating on a hostile abyss where the law is flexible. This happened 4 years ago on a ship doing the Alaskan run Seattle to Juneau. It's a beautiful route. Glaciers, whales, cold mist. The passengers are usually older, quieter, not the party crowd you get in the Caribbean. I was the night watch officer on the bridge. My job was to monitor the radar, the course, and the safety systems between midnight and 4. It's usually the most boring shift. Just me, a junior officer named David, and the hum of the instruments. It was 2:15 a.m. The ship was silent. The only light came from the glow of the control panels. Outside, the pitch-black water of the North Pacific churned against the hull. "Bridge, this is security. We have a situation on Deck 5. The radio crackled, breaking the silence. It was Ray, the head of the night security detail. Ray was a former Chicago cop, a guy who didn't get rattled easily, but his voice sounded tight. "Go ahead, Ray," I replied, leaning into the mic. "We've got a report of a jumper, port side. Passenger witnessed it from his balcony." My stomach dropped. Man overboard is the call every sailor dreads. The survival rate in these waters, at night, is near zero. Hypothermia sets in within minutes. "Sound the alarm," I ordered David. "Mark the GPS coordinates. Turn the ship." The bridge erupted into controlled chaos. David hit the button. 3 long blasts of the ship's whistle shattered the night, waking 4,000 people. I grabbed the binoculars and ran to the portside wing of the bridge, scanning the dark water. The massive spotlights swept the waves, cutting through the mist like lightsabers. We initiated the Williamson turn, a maneuver to bring the ship back around to the point where the person fell. "Ray," I radioed. "Do we have an ID? Who saw it?" "Witness is a Mr. Karras, cabin 5012. He says he saw a woman climb the railing and drop. He's pretty shaken up, but he's adamant." We spent 4 hours searching. We launched the rescue boats. The Coast Guard flew a chopper out from a nearby station. We found nothing. No body, no debris, just black water and ice. By sunrise, we had to call it off. The mood on the ship was grim. The captain made an announcement, asking for prayers. We did a head count. That's when things got weird. Every passenger was accounted for. We checked the manifest 3 times. We physically scanned every key card. We checked every cabin. 3,000. 402 passengers boarded in Seattle. 3,000. 402 passengers were standing in the muster stations or in their rooms. "Maybe he saw a seal?" David suggested, rubbing his tired eyes. "Or a piece of trash?" I wanted to believe that, but I had to interview the witness. It was protocol. I went down to cabin 5012. Mr. Karras was a calm thinker, a retired architect, rational, precise. He wasn't drunk. He wasn't seeking attention. He was sitting on his bed, staring at his hands. "I know what I saw, officer," he told me calmly. She was wearing a yellow sundress. She had long dark hair. She didn't scream. She didn't hesitate. She looked right at me, smiled, and stepped off. "Mr. Karras," I said gently. "We've counted everyone. No one is missing." He looked up at me, and the look in his eyes gave me chills. It wasn't confusion. It was pity. "Then you counted wrong. Or, she wasn't on your list." We reviewed the CCTV footage. The cameras on Deck 5 are sparse to protect privacy near the balconies, but there is a camera covering the maintenance corridor that runs parallel to the cabins. I sat in the security office with Ray, rewinding the tape to 2:10 a.m. "There," Ray pointed. Grainy black and white footage. A figure walking down the hallway. It was a woman. Long hair. A light-colored dress that could have been yellow. She was walking barefoot, but there was something wrong with the way she moved. She didn't bob with the motion of the ship. She glided, and as she passed under the light fixture, she didn't cast a shadow. "Glitch in the feed?" Ray asked, his voice trembling slightly. "Rewind," I said. We watched it again. She walked past cabin 5010, then 5012. She stopped in front of Mr. Karras' door. She stood there for a full minute, facing the wood. Then she turned toward the camera. Her face was blurred, pixelated by the low resolution. But her mouth was open in a silent scream that stretched her jaw impossibly wide. Then the footage cut to static. "What the hell is that?" Ray whispered. "Check the passenger logs for previous voyages," I said, a cold dread settling in my gut. "Search for suicide or missing person on this ship." It took Ray an hour. He found a file from 3 years ago, a woman named Elena. She had jumped from Deck 5 during an Alaskan cruise. "Show me her photo," I commanded. Ray pulled up the ID picture. Long dark hair, and in the photo, she was wearing a bright yellow sundress. Okay, I said, trying to maintain my composure. So, we have a ghost story. Mr. Karras saw a residual haunting. It happens at sea. Sailors talk about it. I thought that was the end of it. Just a spooky story to tell at the bar. But that night, the second night of the search, Mr. Karras called the bridge again. "She's back," he whispered into the phone. "She's on my balcony." "Mr. Karras, stay inside. Lock the door," I said, grabbing my radio. "I'm sending security." "She's not looking at the ocean this time," Karras said, his voice flat, resigned. "She's tapping on the glass. She wants to come in." "Do not open that door," I shouted. "She says." Karras paused, and I could hear a rhythmic tap, tap, tap in the background through the phone line. "She says she's cold. She says there's room for one more." "Ray, get down there now," I yelled to the security team. "She's opening the door, officer," Karras said. "The latch is lifting from the outside." "That's impossible," I said. "Balcony doors lock from the inside." "Not for her," Karras whispered. Then, the line went dead. Ray kicked the door to cabin 5012. It didn't budge. The deadbolt was engaged. He kicked again, harder, the wood splintering around the frame, until the lock gave way with a sickening crunch. "Security! Mr. Karras!" Ray yelled, his flashlight sweeping the dark room. I was watching on the bridge monitors, my knuckles white as I gripped the console desk. David was beside me, holding his breath. On the screen, we saw Ray and two other guards storm the room. "Bridge, the room is empty." Ray's voice crackled over the radio, breathless. "I repeat, the room is empty. Check the balcony, Ray," I commanded, though I already knew what he would find. Ray moved toward the curtains, which were billowing violently into the room. The sliding glass door was wide open. The wind from the Alaskan Gulf was howling, sucking papers and brochures out into the night. Ray stepped out onto the small balcony. He shone his light over the railing, down into the churning black water. "He's gone, Bridge." We initiated the search protocols again. We turned the ship. We scanned the water for hours, but just like the woman in the yellow dress, Mr. Karras had vanished into the void. But that wasn't the part that made me quit the industry. People jump. It's a tragic, ugly truth of the cruise business. It happens more than the brochures will ever tell you. No, the reason I left was what we found during the investigation the next morning. I went down to cabin 5012 myself. I needed to see it. The ship's carpenter was already there, fixing the door frame Ray had kicked in. I walked past him to the balcony door. The lock was engaged from the inside, right? I asked the carpenter. Before the passenger opened it, the carpenter looked at me, his face pale. He was an older guy, a skeptic, who had seen everything. He held up the latch mechanism of the sliding door. "Sir, you need to look at this." I took the metal latch in my hand. It was a heavy-duty steel hook designed to withstand hurricane-force winds and waves. It was twisted, bent outward. "Mr. Karras said the latch was lifting from the outside," I remembered, my blood running cold. "A human hand can't do that," the carpenter whispered. "You'd need a crowbar, a hydraulic press, or..." He didn't finish the sentence. I went back to the security office to review the tapes one last time. I had to know. We pulled up the corridor feed. We saw Karras enter his room at 8 p.m. No one else entered. No one left. Then we pulled up the sensor logs for the balcony door. At 2:18 a.m., while I was on the phone with him, the sensor tripped. Door open. But it was the thermal camera mounted on the bridge wing that destroyed me. We didn't check it during the rescue because we were focused on the water, but the system records everything. I rewound the thermal footage to 2:18 a.m. The camera looks down the side of the ship. I saw the heat signature of Mr. Karras step out onto the balcony. He was a bright orange and red shape against the deep blue of the freezing ocean. He stood there for a moment, shivering. Then, I saw the other shape. It climbed up the side of the hull. It shouldn't have been possible. The hull is slick steel, wet with sea spray, vertical and smooth. But this shape moved like a spider, and it was cold. On the thermal imaging, it was a dark blue, almost purple, the same temperature as the ocean water. A cold spot in the shape of a human. It vaulted over the railing. It stood in front of Karis. I watched the orange heat of Karis's body flare, panic, adrenaline. He backed up against the glass. The cold shape reached out. It didn't strike him. It didn't push him. It embraced him. I watched as the orange heat of Karis seemingly merged with the blue cold. The colors bled together on the screen, his warmth being sucked away in seconds. The two figures became one indistinguishable blob of purple. Then, together, they stepped off the ledge. I wiped the logs. I told the captain it was a clear-cut suicide, that Karis had been unstable. I didn't show anyone the thermal footage. I couldn't. If I did, they would have to ground the ship. They would have to admit that something was hunting us in those waters. I resigned as soon as we docked in Juneau. I took a desk job at a logistics company in Nebraska, as far from the ocean as I could get. But sometimes, late at night, I checked the maritime news. Last month, another passenger went missing on that same route. A woman. Witnesses say she was arguing with someone on her balcony, but she was traveling alone. They never found her body. But I know she's not gone. She's just cold. And she's waiting for the next ship. I've always been a rational guy. I'm an accountant. I like numbers, logic, and predictability. That's why I let my girlfriend, Mia, talk me into a cruise. It's all inclusive, Jason, she'd said. You don't have to plan anything. You just eat, drink, and relax. We booked a 7-day trip through the Caribbean on the Oceanic Bliss. For the first 4 days, it was exactly what she promised. Paradise. Then came day 5. We were docked in Cozumel. We had just come back from a snorkeling excursion. Mia was complaining of a headache, blaming the heat. We went back to our cabin room, 9205, an interior stateroom. That was my mistake. I wanted to save money, so I booked a room with no windows, no balcony, just 4 walls and a fake porthole that was really just a mirror. At 4 p.m., the captain's voice boomed over the PA system. He didn't sound like the jovial man who had welcomed us aboard. He sounded strained. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the captain speaking. Due to a unforeseen medical situation on board, and under the orders of the CDC and local port authorities, we are initiating a ship-wide lockdown effective immediately. All passengers must return to their staterooms. Do not leave your room for any reason. Staff will be delivering meals to your door. This is for your safety. Mia was lying on the bed, shivering under the duvet. Great, she mumbled. Probably norovirus. Someone didn't wash their hands at the buffet. I laughed it off. We get room service for a day or two. Could be worse. I was the calm thinker. I assumed it was a standard protocol. I assumed we were safe. By 8 p.m., the ship had left the dock. I could feel the vibrations of the engines. But we were moving fast. Much faster than usual. The hum of the ship was a high-pitched whine. Dinner didn't come. I opened the door to check the hallway. It was empty. Trays of uneaten food from lunch were stacked outside other doors, smelling sour in the humidity. I stepped out to look for a steward. Hey, I jumped. A crew member in a blue jumpsuit was standing at the end of the hall. He wasn't a steward. He was wearing a surgical mask and gloves. Get back inside, sir. Now, he screamed, his eyes wide with genuine panic. We haven't eaten, I argued. My girlfriend isn't feeling well. Back inside, lock the bolt. I retreated and locked the door. Mia was worse. Her skin was burning hot to the touch, but she was complaining of the cold. Her eyes were glassy. Jason, she whispered. It's so loud. What is? The scratching. Inside the walls. I listened. I heard the engines. I heard the AC unit rattling. It's just the ship, babe. Go to sleep. She slept, but I didn't. I sat in the chair, staring at the door. Day 6 passed in a blur. Still no food. The water from the bathroom tap started coming out brown, smelling of rust. I tried calling guest services, but the line was busy. Forever busy. The hallway, however, was not quiet. Every hour, I heard heavy footsteps, thuds, the sound of walkie-talkies. Room 9202. Negative, a muffled voice would say outside, then a heavy thump against the door. Room 9204. Negative, thump. They were moving down the line, checking the rooms. Mia woke up around noon. She sat up in bed and looked at me, but she didn't recognize me. Her pupils were blown wide, swallowing the irises. "They're hungry," she said. Her voice was flat, devoid of emotion. "Who, Mia?" I asked, moving to the side of the bed with a glass of the brown water. "The fish," she smiled, a wide, unhinged smile that showed too many teeth. "They're eating the bottom of the boat, Jason. They want us to come down." "You're delirious," I said, trying to keep my voice steady, but the fear was starting to creep in. I was the skeptic, the logic guy, but seeing the person you love look at you like a stranger, it breaks your logic. She started scratching her arms, hard, digging her nails in until red welts appeared. "Get it out," she hissed. "Get it out of my veins. Mia, stop." I grabbed her wrists. She was incredibly strong. She fought me, snapping her teeth at my face like a rabid animal. I managed to pin her down and wrap her in the sheets. She screamed for a while, then passed out again. I needed help. I needed a doctor. I went to the door. I was going to break the rules. I was going to find someone. I put my hand on the latch, but stopped when I heard voices right outside. "What about this one? 9205? A man's voice, harsh, muffled by a gas mask. "Thermal scan shows 2 heat signatures," the second voice replied. "One is elevated, critical. Mark it," the first voice said. "Do not open." "Repeat, do not open." "Waste protocol." I froze. "Waste protocol?" I put my eye to the peephole. The glass was fisheye, distorting the hallway. I saw 2 men. They weren't wearing the standard crew uniforms anymore. They were in full hazmat suits, heavy, yellow rubber suits with black visors. One of them was holding a canister with a spray nozzle. He stepped up to the door across from mine, 9206, where an elderly couple stayed. He raised the nozzle and sprayed a bright green check mark on the wood. "Clear," he muttered. Then he turned to my door. He stared right into the peephole. I held my breath, praying he couldn't see me. The black visor was soulless, reflecting the hallway lights. He raised the canister. The sound of the spray paint was loud in the silence. He didn't spray a green check. He sprayed a large, dripping red X across my door. "Seal it," the man said. The other man pulled a drill from his belt. I stumbled back as the sound of a drill bit tearing into metal screamed through the room. They weren't coming in to help. They were drilling bolts into the frame from the outside. They were sealing us in. The sound of the drill was deafening, a high-pitched scream of metal biting into metal that vibrated through the doorframe and into my teeth. I pounded on the door, shouting until my throat felt like it was bleeding. "Stop! You can't do this! There are people in here!" The drilling stopped. For a second, I thought they had listened. Then, I heard the heavy clunk of a bolt being hammered into place. Then another. Then a third. They weren't just locking us in. They were bolting a steel plate over the door. "Please," I begged, pressing my forehead against the cold wood. "She's sick. She needs a doctor." "We know," the muffled voice came from the other side. It sounded detached, like a recorded message. "That's why you're staying there, for the safety of the vessel." Then, footsteps, heavy boots retreating down the corridor. I slumped against the door, sliding down until I hit the floor. The reality of the situation crashed down on me. We were in an interior room. No windows, no balcony, one entrance. And now, that entrance was sealed. We were effectively in a steel box buried deep within the belly of a floating city. A low moan from the bed snapped me back to the present. Mia was thrashing. The sheets were tangled around her legs, soaked in sweat. I scrambled over to her. The heat radiating off her body was unnatural, like opening an oven door. "Jason," she rasped. Her eyes were open, but they weren't looking at me. They were darting frantically around the room, tracking invisible movements in the corners. The water is rising." "No, babe, there's no water." I soothed, grabbing a washcloth from the bathroom and dampening it with the brown tap water. I wiped her forehead. "We're safe. "They're coming through the vents," she hissed, grabbing my wrist. Her grip was bruising. "They have teeth. Like needles." "Who, Mia?" "The crabs," she whispered, her voice trembling with terrified conviction. "They eat the eyes first. The next 6 hours were a descent into hell." I was the calm thinker, the accountant who solved problems with logic. But logic doesn't apply when you are trapped in a dark room with a dying person and no way out. The air grew heavy. The ventilation had been cut. The room, already humid, turned into a sauna. The smell became unbearable, a mix of rust, sweat, and something sweet and rotting coming from Mia's breath. Around midnight, the power went out. The room plunged into absolute, suffocating darkness, the kind of darkness that has weight. I fumbled for my phone, turning on the flashlight. The battery was at 14%. "Mia?" I called out, shining the light toward the bed. The bed was empty. My heart hammered against my ribs. "Mia?" A low growl came from the corner of the room, near the closet. I swept the beam of light across the floor. She was crouched in the corner, naked. She had clawed through her skin. Blood, dark and thick, was smeared across her chest and arms. But it was her face that broke me. She was grinning, a wide, slack-jawed grin that showed her bloody gums. She had chewed her lower lip raw. "Mia." Oh God. I took a step forward. She lunged. It wasn't the clumsy stumble of a sick person. It was an explosion of kinetic energy. She hit me in the chest, knocking the wind out of me and sending the phone skittering across the floor. The lights spun, casting dizzying shadows against the walls. We wrestled in the semi-darkness. She was screaming, not words, just primal sounds of rage. She bit my shoulder, her teeth sinking deep into the muscle. I shouted in pain and shoved her back. "Mia, it's me. It's Jason." She didn't know me. The virus, or whatever this was, had burned away the woman I loved. All that was left was the fever and the violence. I managed to kick her off. She hit the wall with a sickening thud, but immediately started scrambling back up. I scrambled toward the bathroom, grabbed the handle, and threw myself inside, locking the door just as her body slammed against it. Thud, thud, thud. She threw herself against the flimsy bathroom door over and over again. I backed into the shower stall, curling into a ball, clutching my bleeding shoulder. I stayed there for what felt like days. My phone was outside. I had no light. I sat in the pitch black, listening to the woman I was going to propose to slowly destroy herself on the other side of the door. Eventually, the banging stopped. It was replaced by a wet, hacking cough. Then, the scratching started. She was scratching at the floorboards, at the door, at her own skin. Then, silence. Real, heavy silence. I waited. 1 hour. 2. "Mia?" I whispered. Nothing. I knew I had to go out. The air in the bathroom was running out. I stood up, my legs shaking, and unlocked the door. I pushed it open slowly. The emergency track lighting in the hallway outside had kicked on, leading a faint red light through the crack under the main cabin door. It provided just enough illumination to see. Mia was lying face down in the center of the room. She wasn't moving. I crept over to her. I touched her neck. No pulse. Her skin was already cooling, the fever finally broken by death. I didn't cry. I think I was too dehydrated, too shocked to cry. I just sat next to her body, staring at the red X painted on the other side of the door in my mind's eye. I was alone. I needed water. I went to the mini fridge. Empty. I went to the desk to look for anything. A mint, a cracker. That's when I saw the vent. The ceiling vent cover was slightly loose. I remembered Mia saying, "They're coming through the vents." I dragged the desk chair over. I stood on it and used my car keys to unscrew the remaining bolts. The cover clattered to the floor. The duct was small, too small for a human to fit through, but sound travels. I stuck my head up into the shaft. I heard voices, distant, echoing off the metal. Sector 4 is compromised. Total loss. Incineration protocols. Passengers in the marked rooms. Expendable. I pulled my head out, gasping. They weren't looking for a cure. They weren't waiting for the CDC. They were managing a total loss. I sat back down on the chair. my feet dangling inches from Mia's body. I realized then that the red X wasn't a quarantine marker, it was a tombstone. 2 days later, the ship stopped moving. I was lying on the floor, drifting in and out of consciousness. I was so thirsty, I had started hallucinating that it was raining in the room. I heard a sound. Not the drill. A torch. The smell of burning metal filled the room. Sparks showered down from the doorframe. The steel plate was being cut away. The door was kicked open. Blinding white light flooded the room. Men in military-grade biohazard suits, black, not yellow, swarmed in. They didn't speak to me. 2 of them grabbed me by the arms and dragged me out. "Wait, Mia," I croaked, trying to point back at the room. "Leave the biohazard," one of them commanded. They dragged me down the hallway. I looked at the other doors. 9,000. 204 had a red X. 9,000. 202 had a red X. But 9,000. 206. The elderly couple had a green check. Their door was open. The room was pristine, empty. They had been evacuated days ago. We had been left to die, to slow the spread. They took me to a triage tent set up on a desolate dock in Florida. I was stripped, scrubbed with chemicals until my skin was raw, and put in isolation for 3 weeks. I never saw a lawyer. I saw a government official in a suit who slid a piece of paper across a metal table. The Oceanic Bliss suffered a catastrophic carbon monoxide leak in the lower decks, he recited calmly. Tragic. Hallucinations are a common side effect of poisoning. Your girlfriend passed away from exposure. You sign this, you get a settlement that will take care of you for life. You don't sign it. Well, quarantine can last a very long time, Jason. I signed it. I was weak. I was broken. I just wanted to go home. I live in Arizona now. The desert. No water, no boats. But I can't escape it. Every time I go to a public restroom, every time I stay in a hotel, I check the door, I check the vents. And sometimes, when I'm in a crowd, I hear someone cough that wet, hacking cough. And for a split second, I see it. I see invisible red X's appearing on the foreheads of the people around me. And I know it's only a matter of time before the doors get locked again.